On the 15th of January 1970, U.S. First Lady Pat Nixon sprayed red, white, and blue water on the nose of a new airplane. "My goodness," Nixon remarked, "look how high it is." It was a double-decker Boeing 747 jumbo jet with room for 335 passengers, and had the range to make its inaugural flight from New York to London with ease. The 747 ushered in a new era for wide-body jets, an era marked by engineering failures and dishonest manufacturers. Welcome back. The recent design problems of the Boeing 737 MAX have highlighted the risk of putting profits over safety. But this danger with airliner design goes back more than 50 years to the story of two competing commercial airliners. Shalom Baruchim Chashivim. כשלי התקנון האחרונים של מטוס הבואינג 737 MAX הביאו את תשומת לבנו לסיכוני הרווחים על פני הבטיחות. אך שנה זו עזרה יותר מ-50 שנה לסיפורם של שתי מטוסי נוסעים מתחות. Due to an economy of scale, the 747 meant that airfares were much more affordable. The 747 meant that traveling to other continents became within the economic reach of the middle class. Americans were tasting baguettes in Paris, fresh pasta in Rome, and real sushi in Tokyo. They came back with gourmet tastes, thereby changing American cuisine. It was a far cry from Pat Nixon's own recipe for continental salad. The specific continent was not indicated. The ingredients for continental salad included lemon gelatin, grapefruit juice, diced beets, celery, salad greens, and a dressing that consisted of grapefruit juice, cream cheese, and sesame seeds, as well as mayonnaise. You might also decide you weren't so hungry after all. Although the 747 created changes in cultures and economies, it was so big, it was unwieldy. It wasn't profitable to fly the massive airplane on shorter flights, and it was too big to fit at some airports. Most significantly, the 747 couldn't fit at one of America's most important airports, New York LaGuardia.
I like to wait at LaGuardia. Lots of delays at LaGuardia. Too small for planes at LaGuardia.
The airlines approached manufacturers about a smaller jumbo jet. They wanted an aircraft that could fly to New York LaGuardia that would have 3 engines instead of 4 like on the 747. It would make the airplane cheaper to produce, cheaper to maintain, but they still wanted one that would have the range to fly to Honolulu. 2 aircraft designs emerged, the McDonnell Douglas DC-10 and the Lockheed L-1011 TriStar. The DC-10 was built on older aircraft designs, primarily the DC-8. The Lockheed L-1011 TriStar was an all-new design. They were outwardly quite similar, room for between 250 and 300 passengers, and 3 engines, 1 under each wing, and a third mounted in the vertical stabilizer, the tail. That's where the similarities started to end. Odd as it is, commercial aircraft and their engines are sold separately. The DC-10 was designed to have Pratt & Whitney or General Electric engines. The L-1011 TriStar was designed to have Rolls-Royce engines. But during the early 1970s, Rolls-Royce was bankrupt. That meant that there could be delivery delays. The L-1011 had much more advanced systems.
35,000 feet, flying southwest over Newfoundland.
Oh, that explains the humming.
The humming means you're in Mr. Goldfinger's Lockheed Jetstar heading for Baltimore, and you're his guest.
It had a remarkable auto-land capability. It could land itself, even in dense fog or rain. The L-1011 also had sophisticated air conditioning. That system made it much more comfortable. And the L-1011 had many backup and redundant systems, including 4 redundant hydraulic systems. The DC-10 was $500,000 less expensive, and it would be in service sooner. The earlier L-1011 models also had a shorter range than the DC-10, so most airlines opted for the DC-10. In fact, it would form the backbone of many wide-body fleets, including the fleets of United Airlines, American Airlines. United had 60 of them, American 74. Northwest Orient, later Northwest Airlines, had 45 DC-10s. The DC-10 entered service in August 1971 with American Airlines. Just 9 months later, an American Airlines DC-10 crashed. It was a flight from Detroit to Buffalo. The rear cargo door of American Airlines Flight 72 came open over Windsor, Ontario. With impressive skill, the flight crew managed to navigate the DC-10 back to Detroit. They had no hydraulic systems, so the crew used the thrust of the engines to maneuver the airplane. There was little public outcry because there were no fatalities.
You at the window in the blue shirt! You at the window at the blue shirt! Look out the window! Is it safe? Is it safe? Is it clear? Stand up! Stand up! Face back! Grab the handle, pull it in and no! Other way, in and down! Push, honey.
He doesn't know. Yeah.
Okay, put the window on the seat. Put the window on the seat. Step through. Step through. Turn.
Doors are an important part of commercial aircraft design. They're how you and I get our bags inside, ourselves inside, and how we get out quickly if the airplane were to catch on fire. But poor door design can create eddies in air current, affecting aerodynamics. Even worse, a door that does not seal correctly can lead to a depressurization. The passenger doors on the DC-10 and L-1011 TriStar were almost identical. The doors were plugs. The door itself is bigger than the opening. To close the door, it pushed outward. The pressure differential kept the door closed and sealed. To open the door, it popped inward and rolled up into the ceiling. The cargo doors were different. The DC-10 had cargo doors similar to its predecessor, the DC-8. The door was a clamshell resting outside the airplane. It closed like a flap, and a series of bolts and latches kept it closed. The L-1011 TriStar had plug-type cargo doors, just like the passenger doors. The DC-10 design was cheaper, and it made more room for cargo. The DC-10's cargo doors weren't safe, and McDonnell Douglas knew it. There are 4 primary safety flaws. The DC-10 cargo doors used an electronic actuator to close the door latches, but the actuator was so powerful that it could jam the locking pins. In other words, the pins would be jammed into the wrong place. There was also a pressurization vent, which would close when the door was closed, but the vent door would sometimes be left misaligned. It could close, allowing the aircraft to be pressurized, even though the cargo door wasn't entirely closed. Third, there was an indicator flag next to the door handle. If the flag disappeared, it gave the ground crew the sign that the door was closed. But the flag was unreliable. The flag could disappear even though the door wasn't closed and sealed properly. Lastly, there was no indicator in the flight deck. Only the ground crew knew if the door was closed. McDonnell Douglas knew they had a dangerously flawed design. In 1969, a cargo door blew off at the McDonnell Douglas plant in Long Beach, California. McDonnell Douglas engineers aggressively argued for a fix, but that would have delayed delivery of their new airplanes. In 1970, an American Airlines mechanic reported that the door handle could look like it was closed when it wasn't. McDonnell Douglas acknowledged the complaint, but they did nothing about it. Over the course of a couple years, Dan Applegate wrote memos about the cargo door on the DC-10. Applegate was a safety engineer at the Federal Aviation Administration, or FAA, but McDonnell Douglas wasn't interested in anything that might affect delays for their new aircraft, so nobody acted on Applegate's warnings. Türk Hava Yolları, THY, or Turkish Airlines, was flying the DC-10 between its hub in Istanbul and Paris with an onward tag to London. THY knew about the risks related to the cargo doors, but they made limited and sloppy modifications to their DC-10 fleet. Most of the time, the Paris-London segment was quite empty. but on the 3rd of March 1974, the DC-10 was full. The day before, England had tied 12-12 with France in the Five Nations Rugby Championship at the Parc des Princes. On the 3rd of March, fans from England were ready to go back home. British European Airways, a predecessor to British Airways, was on strike, so the rugby fans found space on other airlines, including the THY DC-10. The THY ground crew at Paris Orly Airport struggled with the DC-10. The baggage handler in charge of the rear cargo door had to use his feet to jam the door handle shut. The door looked closed. 20 minutes after takeoff, the rear cargo door blew open, resulted in an explosive depressurization that ripped through the cabin floor, and the DC-10 could not be maneuvered at all. It crashed in a Menonville forest outside of Paris. All 346 people on board died. 15 years later, yet another design flaw in the DC-10 came to light. United Airlines Flight 232 was a DC-10 flying from United's hub in Denver to its hub at Chicago O'Hare on the 19th of July, 1989. The flight took place on Children's Day promotion, so there were an exceptional number of children on board, 52 of the 296 passengers. While in flight, a fan blade came loose from one of the DC-10 engines. It was a blade from the number 2 engine. That's the one in the vertical stabilizer at the tail. With unthinkable bad luck, the blade severed all 3 of the DC-10's redundant hydraulic systems. The systems all happened to come together in one place, a single point failure. Without hydraulic systems, there was no way to manage the control surfaces of the airplane, the flaps on the wings, the rudder. Captain Al Haynes managed to pull the same feat as the captain of American Airlines flight over Windsor, Ontario. Captain Haynes adjusted the thrust in each of the remaining functional engines, giving him the ability to turn and rotate the jumbo jet. The DC-10 crashed into a cornfield near Sioux City, Iowa. 111 passengers lost their lives, and 11 were children. The catastrophic loss of all hydraulic systems could not have happened on the L-1011 TriStar. The L-1011 had 4, not 3 hydraulic systems, and they were distinctly separate. Their pumps and systems were isolated from each other, and the systems were physically separate at critical points, such as near engines. They knew about this one too.
The hydraulic system is composed of 3 independent systems. They use fire-resistant Skydrol fluid, or the equivalent, and operate at 3,000 pounds per square inch.
McDonnell Douglas engineers discussed the potential for a total hydraulic failure, but they thought the risk was so low that it was beyond design expectation. The L-1011 TriStar faced its own problems, but not due to faulty engineering. It was corruption. The L-1011 was known as the Cadillac of the skies. Pilots and passengers appreciated its quiet, smooth engines and spacious cabin. But the Rolls-Royce delays and the higher cost of the L-1011 put Lockheed under pressure to sell its airplane. They turned to bribery. Japan had 2 major airlines, Japan Airlines and ANA All Nippon Airways. Japan Airlines, JAL, had already purchased the DC-10, so Lockheed funneled $12 million to Japanese politicians to encourage ANA, the other airline, to purchase the L-1011 TriStar, and ANA bought 21 of them. Former Prime Minister Kakue Tanaka was implicated. Tanaka resigned before the Lockheed scandal broke, but it tarnished his reputation amid other scandals. Lockheed also made payments to Italian and Dutch politicians, but the Italian and Dutch national carriers both bought the DC-10. The scandals involving the sales of the L-1011 were precursor to the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act of 1971, making it illegal for American companies to bribe foreign officials.
Well, you can't be serious, General. Do you understand how hard it is to obtain this equipment? I mean, this is the latest U.S. and European stuff. I make commitments, letters of credit, special payoffs.
The L-1011 TriStar stayed in commercial service until 2000. The DC-10 remained in passenger service until 2014. Despite its shoddy engineering and cover-ups, the DC-10 flew for an astonishing 42 years. And I flew on both the DC-10 and L-1011 countless times, and I had a favorite L-1011 flight. Delta Flight 46 from New York Kennedy to Washington Dulles, onward to Frankfurt, and to Moscow Sheremetyevo. I never went all the way to Moscow. It was on the beautiful long-range variant of the L-1011, the TriStar 500. It had a quiet, calm, and spacious cabin with surprisingly comfortable seats, even in economy class. Nesiya betucha v'shuvu b'shalom. Safe travels and return in peace. See you in the next one.